I never thought I'd be sitting here, staring at my phone in our elegant Beacon Hill townhouse, my finger trembling over the cancel reservation button. The winter wind whistled through the old windows, making the crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across our marble countertops. 3 years of marriage, and this moment, this simple act of canceling a trip to the French Riviera, would change everything. I'm Emily Bennett, and this is my story of how a single decision exposed the dark truth behind my picture-perfect life. The house felt unnaturally quiet that February morning, save for the gentle ticking of the antique grandfather clock Ryan had insisted on buying from his mother's collection. The aroma of my lavender tea did little to calm my nerves as I thought about what I was about to do. The trip my husband and his controlling mother Patricia had planned. Another extravagant vacation I wasn't invited to join. Just like the Aspen ski trip last winter and the Tuscany wine tour before that. Always excluded, always an afterthought in my own marriage. My heart raced as I pressed the button. Reservation canceled flashed across my screen, and I felt a mix of triumph and terror wash over me. The $25,000 deposit for their luxury yacht charter vanished with a single touch. I knew Ryan would be furious, but I was tired of being the docile wife who accepted every slight, every exclusion with a polite smile. I moved through our home like a ghost, straightening the modern art pieces I'd carefully curated from my gallery, showings. Each one held a memory of happier times, when Ryan used to attend my exhibitions with pride, before his mother's influence began to poison everything. I paused at my favorite photograph, our wedding day at the Boston Public Garden, snow falling gently around us. We looked so in love, so full of promise. Where did it all go wrong? The sound of the front door opening made my blood run cold. Ryan was home early. I could see the tension in his broad shoulders under his tailored suit as he stepped into our kitchen. His usually handsome face was contorted with rage, his phone gripped tightly in his hand. "What have you done?" His voice, normally smooth and controlled, came out as a menacing growl. I stood my ground, though my hands shook as I set down my teacup. "I couldn't take it anymore," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You're going on another luxury trip with her, excluding me from my own marriage. I had to do something to make you understand." I never saw the blow coming. His fist connected with my stomach with such force that I doubled over, gasping for air. The teacup shattered on the floor, lavender tea spreading across the pristine white tiles like spilled blood. As I crumpled to my knees, Ryan's words cut through the ringing in my ears. "You stupid, ungrateful bitch. You've ruined everything." The world spun around me as I struggled to breathe, black spots dancing across my vision. Through the haze of pain, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. I had to get out. But as consciousness slipped away, I realized this was only the beginning of my nightmare. When I regained consciousness, the house was eerily silent. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through our floor-to-ceiling windows, and my stomach throbbed where Ryan's fist had connected. I pushed myself up slowly from the cold tile floor, wincing at the pain that shot through my abdomen. The shattered teacup fragments surrounded me, a perfect metaphor for my shattered sense of security. My first instinct was to reach for my phone, but it wasn't in my pocket. My purse, which had been on the kitchen counter, was gone too. A wave of panic washed over me as I realized what this meant. With trembling legs, I made my way to our front door, locked. Not just with the regular deadbolt, but with the smart security system Ryan had installed last month. A system he controlled entirely through his phone. I was trapped. Moving from room to room, I began to notice other things missing. My laptop was gone from my home office. The spare key I kept in my jewelry box had vanished. Even my winter coat was missing from the hallway closet. Ryan had thought of everything. In our bedroom, I found my closet in disarray. Drawers pulled open, clothes strewn about. Several of my favorite pieces were missing, including the black cashmere sweater I'd worn to last week's gallery opening. What was he planning to do with my things? On my vanity mirror, held in place by a piece of tape, was a photograph. My hands shook as I took it down. It was a picture from our first date at the Museum of Fine Arts. Ryan and me standing in front of a Monet, both smiling broadly. But now, Ryan's face had been scratched out violently with what looked like a key or pen. Written across the bottom in his precise handwriting were 4 words: "You brought this on yourself." The magnitude of my situation began to sink in. I wasn't just dealing with an angry husband who had hit me in a moment of rage. This was calculated, planned. The methodical removal of my means of escape suggested something far more sinister than a simple loss of temper. I sank onto our king-sized bed, my mind racing. What had I actually stumbled into by canceling that trip? Why would a simple vacation cancellation provoke such an extreme reaction? There had to be more to this, something I wasn't seeing. Through our bedroom window, I could see the lights of Beacon Hill beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over Boston. Somewhere out there, Ryan was probably with his mother Patricia, plotting their next move. Patricia, who had never approved of me, who had spent the last 3 years trying to undermine our marriage with her constant interference and subtle manipulations. A sound from downstairs made me freeze. Footsteps? My heart pounded as I held my breath, listening. But it was just the heating system kicking in, the old pipes groaning in the winter cold. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to act fast. Whatever Ryan was planning, I couldn't just sit here and wait for him to return. I moved to our bathroom, searching for anything I could use to defend myself. Under the sink, behind the cleaning supplies, my fingers found something solid. The old flip phone I'd kept as a backup when I upgraded last year. Ryan must not have known about it. My hands shook as I pulled it out, praying it still had some battery life. When I pressed the power button, the screen remained dark. Dead. Of course it was dead. I hadn't charged it in months. The charger. Where had I put the charger? As I racked my brain trying to remember, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked like a stranger, pale, frightened, with a smudge of dried blood at the corner of her mouth. Was this really what I'd become? The strong, independent gallery curator who'd moved across the country to pursue her dreams in Boston, reduced to this terrified creature jumping at shadows? No, I refused to be a victim. If Ryan thought he could break me, he had severely underestimated the woman he married. I began to systematically search our bedroom, looking for anything that might help me understand what was really going on. There had to be clues, signs I'd missed during our marriage. In his bedside drawer, underneath a stack of business magazines, I found a small black notebook. My hands trembled as I opened it, recognizing Ryan's neat handwriting. Inside were dates, times and amounts, large amounts, money being moved between accounts I'd never heard of, names I didn't recognize, and most disturbing of all, a series of notes about me. My schedule, my friends, my habits. He'd been watching me, documenting my every move. The sound of a car door slamming outside sent me scrambling to return everything exactly as I'd found it. My heart pounded as I crept to the window, peering through the curtains. A black SUV was parked across the street, its engine still running. In the gathering darkness, I couldn't make out the driver's face. But I knew someone was watching the house. I was running out of time. Whatever Ryan and Patricia were involved in, it was bigger than just family drama or controlling behavior. The methodical documentation in that notebook, the mysterious financial transactions, the surveillance. This was something far more dangerous. As I stood in our darkening bedroom, surrounded by the trappings of what I'd thought was a perfect life, one thing became crystal clear. I needed to find a way out of this house before Ryan returned. because something told me that if I didn't escape tonight, I might never get another chance. Standing in the darkness of our Beacon Hill townhouse, I clutched Ryan's black notebook to my chest, my mind racing with possibilities. The financial records hidden in these pages pointed to something sinister. Transactions I'd never known about, dates that coincided with his suspicious trips abroad. But it was the detailed surveillance notes about my daily routine that chilled me to my core. This wasn't just about a canceled vacation to the French Riviera. This was about something much darker. A soft buzz from the ancient flip phone in my pocket nearly made me jump out of my skin. After an hour of charging it behind the bathroom cabinet, it had finally come back to life. My hands trembled as I checked the screen. 3 missed calls. From Megan Torres, my best friend and fellow art enthusiast. She must have been worried when I didn't show up for our weekly coffee meeting at the Bean and Brew. I crept to the bedroom window again, careful to stay hidden behind the heavy curtains. The black SUV was still there, its occupant a shadowy figure, in the driver's seat. The street lamps cast an eerie glow on the fresh snow that had begun to fall, creating an almost peaceful scene that belied the danger I was in.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
My stomach still ached from Ryan's blow, a constant reminder of how quickly my life had unraveled. I needed to think clearly, to plan my escape carefully. The smart security system controlled every door and window in the house, except one. The small window in our guest bathroom, the one Ryan had been meaning to add to the system but never got around to. It was narrow, but I was slim. It might be my only chance. As I gathered essential items into a small backpack, my mind wandered to the first time I met Ryan at the Museum of Fine Arts. He'd seemed so genuine, so interested in my work as a curator. Now I wondered if it had all been calculated, if he'd chosen me specifically for some larger scheme. The way he'd rushed our marriage, how quickly he'd convinced me to merge our finances. A text came through on the flip phone. "Em, please, call me. I'm worried. Megan." I hesitated, knowing any call could potentially be traced, but I needed help. With shaking fingers, I typed out a brief message. "Need help. Can't talk. Come to the back of the house. Emergency." I added a code word we'd created years ago in college for serious situations. Starry night. Our signal that something was desperately wrong. While waiting for Megan's response, I continued gathering what I could. Some cash I'd hidden in an old art book, my passport from the back of my desk drawer, and a few essential documents. The notebook went into the backpack, too, evidence of whatever Ryan was involved in. The guest bathroom window was small and painted shut, probably unopened for years. Using a metal nail file, I carefully worked around the edges, trying to loosen the paint without making too much noise. Every creak and scrape seemed deafening in the quiet house. Outside, the snow was falling heavier now, which could work to my advantage. Fewer people on the streets to witness my escape. A soft ping from the phone. 10 minutes, back window, car running. Megan's response filled me with both relief and anxiety. 10 minutes to escape through a window that still wouldn't budge, with an unknown watcher in the SUV outside. Just then, a sound from downstairs made my blood run cold, the electronic beep of the security system. Someone had entered a code. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house, accompanied by whispered voices. My heart nearly stopped when I recognized both Ryan's voice and his mother Patricia's distinctive tone. "She has to be here somewhere." Patricia's cold voice carried up the stairs. "The security logs show no exits, and Thompson confirms no one's left the house." "Oh, she's here," Ryan replied, his voice hard with anger. "And when we find her, she'll wish she'd never even thought about interfering with our plans." I worked frantically at the window, no longer caring about the noise. The paint finally cracked, and with a supreme effort, I managed to push the window up just enough to squeeze through. The frigid February air rushed in, but I barely felt it through my adrenaline. Footsteps on the stairs now. They were coming up. The guest bathroom had no lock, and I knew I had seconds at most. I pushed my backpack through the window first, wincing as it landed with a soft thud in the snow below. Then, taking a deep breath, I began to squeeze through the narrow opening. The window frame dug into my ribs as I wiggled through, my progress agonizingly slow. Below me, about 15 feet down, was a small section of roof over the back porch, covered in fresh snow. If I could just reach it. The bathroom door burst open just as I got my shoulders through. I heard Patricia's gasp of surprise, followed by Ryan's furious shout. Hands grabbed at my legs, but the snow-dampened windowsill made me too slippery to hold. With a final desperate push, I slid through the opening and landed hard on the porch roof below. Pain shot through my ankle as I hit the slick surface, but I couldn't stop. I could hear Ryan and Patricia's shouts above me as I scrambled to the edge of the roof. My backpack had landed in a snowbank, partially cushioned by the fresh powder. Following its path, I half jumped, half fell into the same snowbank, the soft snow breaking my fall but soaking through my clothes instantly. Megan's car was idling in the narrow alley behind our house, her familiar blue Subaru a beacon of hope in the swirling snow. I grabbed my backpack and ran, my wet clothes freezing in the bitter wind, my injured ankle screaming with every step. Behind me, I could hear doors slamming and voices shouting, but I didn't look back. I practically dove into Megan's passenger seat, gasping out, "Drive!" before I'd even closed the door. As we sped away through the snowy streets of Beacon Hill, I finally allowed myself to look back. The black SUV was pulling out behind us, its headlights glaring in the rearview mirror. "Emily, what the hell is going on?" Megan asked, her knuckles white on the steering wheel as she navigated the slippery streets. "You look like you've seen a ghost. And is that blood on your shirt?" I clutched my backpack to my chest, feeling the hard edges of Ryan's notebook inside. "It's not safe to talk here," I managed between chattering teeth. "We need to lose that SUV first. Take the next right." For the next 20 minutes, we wound through the narrow streets of Boston, taking random turns, doubling back, using every trick we could think of to shake our tail. Megan, bless her, didn't ask any more questions, focusing instead on her driving, as the snow made the roads increasingly treacherous. Finally, after a particularly complex series of turns through the Back Bay area, we lost sight of the SUV. Megan drove for another 10 minutes just to be sure, before pulling into the underground parking garage of her apartment building in Cambridge. As the garage door closed behind us, cutting off the howling wind and swirling snow, the reality of what had just happened hit me like a physical blow. I began to shake uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from delayed shock and terror. Megan turned off the engine and turned to face me, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Okay, we're safe now. Tell me everything." In her warm apartment 20 minutes later, wrapped in dry clothes and clutching a mug of hot tea, I began to share my story. The surveillance, the hidden financial records, the violent reaction to my canceling the trip. As I spoke, Megan's face grew increasingly grave. "There's more," I said, pulling out the notebook. "Look at these transactions, these names. Ryan and Patricia aren't just planning vacations. They're moving massive amounts of money through what look like shell companies. And these notes about me." I showed her the pages of detailed observations about my daily routine. Megan studied the notebook, her frown deepening. "Emily, this is serious. These aren't just normal business transactions. This looks like money laundering and the way they've been tracking you. It's like they were preparing for something." "But why?" I asked, wincing as I shifted and my bruised stomach protested. "Why marry me just to—" I couldn't finish the thought. "Think about it," Megan said slowly. "You're perfect on paper. Successful curator, clean record, respected in the community. What better cover for whatever they're doing? And now that you've disrupted their plans. A knock at the door made us both freeze. Megan motioned for me to stay quiet as she crept to the peephole. After a moment, she relaxed slightly. "It's just Mrs. Chen from down the hall," she whispered. But when she opened the door, it wasn't the elderly Mrs. Chen standing there. It was Hannah Chen, Patricia Sullivan's executive assistant, looking nervous and out of breath. "Thank God you're here," Hannah said quickly, stepping inside and closing the door. "They're looking for you everywhere. I don't have much time, but there's something you need to know about the French Riviera trip. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a cover for something much bigger. And now that you've canceled it..." She glanced over her shoulder anxiously. "You've thrown a wrench into years of planning, and they're not going to let that go." I stared at Hannah, my mind struggling to process this new development. You know what they're involved in?" Hannah nodded grimly. "I've been gathering evidence for months, working with the FBI. That trip you canceled? It was supposed to be the final piece of a massive international money laundering operation. But now..." She pulled out her phone, showing us a series of messages. "They're accelerating their timeline. They're going to try to pin everything on you, Emily. Make it look like you've been the one behind it all." The room seemed to spin as I processed this information. My whole marriage had been a setup, a careful construction to create the perfect scapegoat. And now that I'd disrupted their plans, they were going to destroy me to save themselves. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Hannah said urgently. "I have a contact in the FBI who..." She never finished her sentence. A crash from the hallway made us all jump. Heavy footsteps approached Megan's door, and a familiar voice called out, "Emily? Sweetheart? I know you're in there. Let's talk about this like adults." Ryan's voice, smooth and reasonable, as if he hadn't just spent the evening hunting me through the streets of Boston. As if he hadn't hit me and trapped me in our home. As if our entire marriage hadn't been revealed as an elaborate fraud. Hannah's face went pale. "They followed me," she whispered. "I led them right to you. I'm so sorry." The door handle began to turn, and I realized with horror that in our shock at Hannah's arrival, Megan hadn't engaged the deadbolt. We were out of time. Time seemed to slow as Megan's apartment door began to swing open. In that split second, Hannah sprang into action, shoving both Megan and me toward the bedroom while simultaneously pulling something from her purse. As Ryan's figure filled the doorway, a piercing alarm suddenly erupted from Hannah's phone. The sound so sharp it made everyone flinch. "Fire alarm triggered. All residents evacuate immediately," blared the building's speaker system. Hannah had activated the building's emergency protocols. In the ensuing chaos of sirens and flashing lights, neighbors began pouring into the hallway, forcing Ryan to step back to avoid drawing attention to himself. "Through the fire escape," Hannah hissed, ushering us toward Megan's bedroom window. The metal staircase was slick with fresh snow, but it was our only option. Behind us, I could hear Ryan's frustrated voice trying to navigate through the crowd of evacuating residents. The bitter February wind cut through my borrowed clothes as we descended the fire escape. My fingers burned against the frozen metal railings, but fear drove me forward. 4 floors below, Hannah's silver Prius sat idling in the alley. The engine's soft hum barely audible above the continuing wail of the fire alarm. We piled into the car, Hannah taking the wheel while Megan helped me into the back seat. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Ryan's furious face at Megan's bedroom window. Patricia appearing beside him like a dark shadow. "We need to get to Federal Plaza," Hannah said, her voice steady despite our harrowing escape. "I've been working with Special Agent Kendrick for months, building a case against the Sullivans. The evidence is solid, but they needed something to push them over the edge to move. Your canceled reservation just gave them that push." The city streets were nearly empty, the late-night snow keeping most people indoors. Hannah drove carefully but quickly, taking a circuitous route through Cambridge and across the river. In the rearview mirror, I noticed she kept checking for any signs of pursuit. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How long have you known what they were doing?" Hannah's eyes met mine in the mirror. "I started suspecting something was wrong about a year ago. The numbers in the Foundation's books didn't add up. Too much money moving through accounts that shouldn't have had that kind of activity. Then I found the first set of forged documents. My mind flashed to all the charity galas, the fundraising events, the seemingly endless parade of good works that Patricia had orchestrated through the Sullivan Family Foundation. Had it all been a front? The Foundation was perfect cover," Hannah continued, as if reading my thoughts. "Who questions money moving through a charitable organization, especially one run by such a respected family? But they got greedy. The amounts got bigger, the transactions more frequent. That's when the FBI started paying attention." Megan, who had been quietly processing everything, suddenly spoke up. "The art gallery, was that part of it too?" A wave of nausea hit me as I realized what she was suggesting. My position as curator at one of Boston's most prestigious contemporary art galleries, had that been part of their plan all along? "Art is one of the oldest methods of money laundering," Hannah confirmed grimly. "High-value items with subjective worth, private sales, international shipping. It's perfect for moving large sums of money undetected." The pieces started falling into place. The sudden interest Ryan had shown in my career after we married, his insistence that I take the curator position when it was offered, the pressure to handle certain private collections. Had I been unknowingly facilitating their crimes all along? A flash of headlights in the side mirror caught my attention. A black SUV had appeared behind us, moving fast despite the slippery roads. "Hannah!" I started to warn, but she had already noticed. "Hold on," she said calmly, making a sharp turn onto a side street. The SUV followed, closing the distance. Hannah's calm demeanor shifted slightly as she took another turn, then another, her movements becoming more urgent. "There's a burner phone in the glove compartment," she told Megan. "Speed dial 1. Tell them we need immediate assistance at the secondary location." As Megan made the call, I clutched Ryan's notebook tighter. Inside these pages was proof of their crimes, but would it be enough? And more importantly, would we live long enough to share it with the authorities? The SUV was getting closer, close enough that I could make out two figures in the front seat. It wasn't Ryan and Patricia. These were men I'd never seen before, their expressions hard and professional. Whatever was in that notebook, whatever secrets I'd stumbled upon, they were worth enough to send professionals after us. Hannah's driving was impressive, but the pursuing vehicle had the advantage of power and weight on the snowy streets. As we approached an intersection, our pursuer made its move, accelerating to pull alongside us. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The SUV began to swerve toward us, attempting to force us off the road. Hannah yanked the wheel, hard, sending us into a controlled slide through the intersection. The SUV, committed to its maneuver, couldn't adjust in time. It slid past us, straight into the path of an oncoming snowplow. The crash was deafening. Metal screamed against metal as the SUV collided with the massive plow, spinning out into a lamppost. Steam rose from its crumpled hood as we sped away, Hannah's hands steady on the wheel despite what we'd just witnessed. "We're 5 minutes out," she announced, her voice tight. "Agent Kendrick will meet us in the parking garage." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my old flip phone. I needed to call my sister Claire in Portland to warn her. If Ryan and Patricia were willing to send professionals after me, they might try to get to me through my family. But before I could dial, Hannah's phone rang, the sound sharp in the tense silence of the car. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. "It's Patricia," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't answer it," Megan said immediately, but Hannah shook her head. "I have to. If I don't, They'll know for sure I'm helping you." She put the phone on speaker. Patricia's voice filled the car, as coldly elegant as ever. "Hannah, dear, is everything all right? I've been trying to reach you." "Yes, Mrs. Sullivan. I'm just heading home. The weather's awful." Patricia's hum was thoughtful. Dangerous. "That's interesting because I could have sworn I saw your car heading toward Federal Plaza. In fact, I'm quite certain Emily Bennett is with you right now." My blood ran cold. How did she know? "Mrs. Sullivan, Let me be clear," Patricia interrupted, her voice like ice. "Whatever you think you know, whatever evidence you think you have, it won't be enough. Do you really think we haven't prepared for this? Every transaction, every document, every piece of evidence you've collected." It all points to Emily, the ambitious young curator, using her position to facilitate international art fraud. Such a shame. She seemed so trustworthy. I felt the blood drain from my face. They really had set me up to take the fall. "Turn the car around, Hannah," Patricia continued. "Bring her to the warehouse on Channel Street. We can resolve this quietly, or don't, and watch how quickly a dedicated FBI informant can become a suspected co-conspirator. Your choice, dear." The line went dead. Hannah's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "She's bluffing," she said, but her voice trembled slightly. "The FBI has records of my cooperation, documentation of everything. Documentation that's probably already been altered or deleted," I finished quietly. "They've had years to plan this, to set everything up so that when the time came—" "We're not turning around," Megan said firmly. "We have the notebook. We have Emily's testimony. We can prove—" A sharp crack cut through the air, and suddenly, the car lurched to the right. Hannah fought the wheel as we skidded on the snow-covered street. Another crack, a second tire blown out. "Sniper," Hannah said grimly, struggling to keep the car under control. "They're hurting us." Sure enough, as we slid to a stop, I could see we'd been forced onto Channel Street. Ahead, the dark bulk of abandoned warehouses loomed against the snowy sky. Behind us, headlights appeared, multiple vehicles blocking our retreat. Hannah turned to face me, her expression desperate. "The notebook. The real evidence isn't in the written records, it's in the paper itself. The watermarks, the ink compositions. I've been collecting samples, building a forensic trail. That's what they're really after. Whatever you do, don't let them get it." Before I could respond, our doors were yanked open. Rough hands pulled us from the car, separating us. Through the swirling snow, I caught a glimpse of Ryan striding toward us, Patricia close behind. "Oh, Emily," Ryan said, his voice almost sad. "You really should have just gone along with things. We had such plans for you." I clutched the notebook tighter, my mind racing. In the distance, I could hear sirens, but they seemed impossibly far away. Whatever was going to happen, it would be over before help arrived. Patricia stepped forward, her elegant coat dusted with snow. "One last chance, dear. Give us the notebook. Sign the confession we've prepared, and this can all end quietly. Fight us and, well, accidents happen in weather like this. Especially to people who've recently shown signs of mental instability." I looked at Megan, at Hannah, both held firmly by Ryan's men. I thought of all the lies, all the manipulation, all the careful groundwork they'd laid to make me their perfect scapegoat. Then I thought of the notebook in my hands, and what Hannah had said about the real evidence. And I made my choice. The swirling snow around Channel Street's abandoned warehouses did little to mask the predatory gleam in Patricia's eyes as she extended her manicured hand toward me. The notebook felt heavy in my grip, its pages containing not just written evidence, but according to Hannah, forensic proof of the Sullivans' crimes within its very materials. My fingers trembled against its leather cover as I took a small step backward. "Time's up, Emily," Ryan called out. his voice carrying across the empty lot. "You're only making this harder on yourself." He gestured to his men, who tightened their grip on Megan and Hannah. The sound of distant sirens had faded, leaving only the hollow whistle of wind through the abandoned buildings. I glanced at the dark waters of Boston Harbor behind me, then back at the notebook. In that moment, I made my decision. With all my strength, I hurled the notebook toward the water. The look of shock on Patricia's face was almost worth it. Almost. What happened next was chaos. Ryan's men released Megan and Hannah, lunging for the notebook as it arced through the snowy air. Patricia screamed orders, her composed facade cracking, and I ran. Not toward the water as they expected, but straight into the nearest warehouse through a broken window. The interior was pitch black and freezing. My feet crunched on broken glass as I stumbled forward, using my phone's dim light to navigate. Behind me, I heard the splintering of wood as others followed. The beam of flashlights cut through the darkness, searching. "She's in here somewhere." Ryan's voice echoed off the metal walls. "Find her." I ducked behind a rusted piece of machinery, trying to control my breathing. The warehouse was massive, filled with abandoned equipment and shipping containers. In the dim light filtering through broken windows, I could make out multiple levels connected by metal catwalks. A text illuminated my phone. "Second floor, east side, fire door, coming for you. H." Hannah was free. That meant Megan probably was too. But between me and the second floor was an open space I'd have to cross to reach the stairs. Flashlight beams swept the area as Ryan's men spread out through the warehouse. The sound of footsteps on metal above made me look up. Through the gaps in the catwalk, I caught glimpses of someone moving. Patricia, her heels clicking deliberately on the metal grating. "Emily, darling." Her voice dripped with false concern, echoing through the space. "You're only making things worse. Think about it. Who will believe your story? The troubled artist, desperate for success, using her position to move black market art? We have years of documentation, witness statements, all pointing to you." She was trying to draw me out, but her words carried a chilling truth. They'd spent years building this fiction around me, creating a paper trail that would lead investigators exactly where they wanted them to look. A crash from the far end of the warehouse made several flashlight beams swing in that direction. I seized the opportunity, darting from my hiding place toward the stairs. I made it halfway before a light found me. "There!" I abandoned stealth. For speed, taking the metal stairs two at a time. A gunshot rang out, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The railing beside me sparked where the bullet hit. "No shooting!" Patricia's voice cracked like a whip. "We can't have bullet holes to explain!" I reached the second floor, my lungs burning. Where was the fire door Hannah had mentioned? The catwalks formed a maze, connecting various platforms and office spaces. Through the windows, I could see more snow beginning to fall. Another text lit up my phone. 2 minutes. Keep moving. Keep moving. I could do that. I'd spent 3 years moving through life as the perfect wife, the unwitting pawn in their scheme. I could keep moving for 2 more minutes. A shadow ahead made me freeze. Ryan stepped out onto the catwalk, blocking my path. In the dim light, his handsome features were twisted into something unrecognizable. "You know what I don't understand?" he said, moving toward me slowly. "Why couldn't you just be happy with what you had? The career, the lifestyle, the status. It was all real. You just had to play your part." "Play my part?" My voice shook with anger. "You mean be the perfect patsy for when it all fell apart? The trustworthy curator who suddenly turned criminal?" He shrugged, still advancing. "Everyone has their role, Emily. Yours was just more complex than most." Movement behind him caught my eye. A figure in black, moving silently across another catwalk. Hannah. She held up 3 fingers, then 2. "You never loved me, did you?" I asked, keeping Ryan's attention on me. It was all just part of the plan. Love? He actually laughed. Love is for people who can't see the bigger picture. This was business. You were an investment. One finger. The explosion of sound and light from behind Ryan was overwhelming. Flashbang grenades, I would later learn. In the chaos that followed, I barely registered Hannah grabbing my arm, pulling me toward a previously hidden door. FBI! Everyone down! The warehouse erupted with shouts and running feet. Through my dazed vision, I saw Ryan stagger, trying to escape. Patricia's voice rose above the chaos, no longer elegant but shrill with panic. Hannah pulled me through the fire door into a stairwell where Megan waited. Above us, a helicopter's searchlight suddenly illuminated the area through the building's broken roof. Agent Kendrick came through, Hannah gasped as we descended. The notebook was a fake. The real evidence was delivered to the FBI an hour ago. We just needed to keep them distracted long enough for the warrants to come through. My legs gave out as we reached the bottom of the stairs. The events of the night, the escape from the house, the car chase, the warehouse, caught up. With me all at once. Megan caught me before I hit the ground. Easy, she murmured. It's over. You're safe. But it wasn't over. Not really. As FBI agents swarmed the building, as Ryan and Patricia were led out in handcuffs, as evidence was collected and statements were taken, I knew this was just the beginning. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and paperwork. I sat, in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket around my shoulders, watching my former life crumble. Agent Kendrick, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, explained what would happen next. The evidence is overwhelming, she said, showing me documents on her tablet. Financial records, forged artwork provenance, money trails leading through dozens of shell companies. Hannah's been helping us build this case for months. When you canceled that reservation, you accidentally disrupted a major transfer they had planned. It forced them to accelerate their timeline. And I was supposed to take the fall, I said numbly. She nodded. They had everything in place. Documentation showing you using your position at the gallery to facilitate art fraud. Offshore accounts in your name, even emails they'd fabricated showing your growing desperation for money. When it all came crashing down, you would have been the perfect scapegoat. Dawn was breaking over Boston Harbor as we finally left the scene. The snow had stopped, leaving the city wrapped in a pristine white blanket that seemed to mock the ugliness of what had transpired. Hannah had gone with the FBI to provide additional testimony. Megan insisted I come stay with her sister in Brookline, somewhere Ryan's remaining associates wouldn't think to look. As we drove through the quiet morning streets, I thought about the life I'd been living, the carefully curated lies, the subtle manipulations, the way they'd shaped me into exactly what they needed. A respected professional with just enough ambition to make her fall from grace believable. What happens now? Megan asked softly as we pulled into her sister's driveway. I watched the sunrise paint the snow in shades of pink and gold. Now I take back my life. My real life. The following days were a whirlwind of federal agents, lawyers, and reporters. The story broke in the Boston Globe. Prestigious Families Art Foundation revealed as money laundering operation. My name was mentioned, but as a victim, not a perpetrator. Hannah's careful collection of evidence had ensured that. I learned more about the scope of their operation than I'd ever wanted to know. The Sullivan Family Foundation had been moving money for international criminal organizations for years, using art acquisitions and donations to clean dirty money. My gallery position had given them access to legitimate art world connections, making their transactions seem more credible. A week after the arrests, I stood in my old office at the gallery, packing my personal belongings. The gallery itself was under investigation, though the owners had been cleared of any involvement in the Sullivan schemes. They'd offered to let me stay on, but I knew I needed a fresh start. As I placed the last photo in my box, one of me and Megan at college graduation, before I'd ever heard the name Sullivan, my phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "Turn on the news. You need to see this." I pulled up a news stream on my laptop. Patricia Sullivan's face filled the screen, but not the elegantly composed society matron I remembered. This Patricia was being led into court in handcuffs, her designer outfit replaced by prison orange. Facing multiple charges of money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy, the reporter was saying. Sources say Patricia Sullivan has begun cooperating with authorities, providing information about other organizations involved in the international art fraud scheme. Another text from Hannah. "She's throwing everyone under the bus to save herself. Classic Patricia." I thought about the woman who had spent 3 years subtly undermining me, making me doubt myself, all while positioning me to take the fall for her crimes. There was a certain justice in watching her scramble to save herself now. Ryan, I learned, was refusing to cooperate. His lawyer released a statement claiming he was also a victim of his mother's machinations, but the evidence Hannah had gathered told a different story. His signature was on too many documents, his voice on too many recorded conversations for that defense to work. 2 weeks after the warehouse incident, I stood in my new apartment in Cambridge, surrounded by boxes. It was smaller than the Beacon Hill townhouse, but it was mine. No hidden agendas, no elaborate deceptions, just a fresh start. Megan helped me unpack, filling the space with warmth and honest friendship. We hung art on the walls, pieces I'd chosen because I loved them, not because they needed to establish my credentials in the art world. "Look what I found," Megan said, pulling something from a box. It was the photo Ryan had scratched through, the one he'd left as a warning the night everything fell apart. She started to throw it away, but I stopped her. "No," I said, taking the photo. "I want to keep it, to remind me." "Remind you of what?" I looked at the damaged photo, at the young woman who'd thought she was getting her fairy tale ending. To remind me to trust my instincts. To remind me that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. That night, I sat on my new balcony, watching the lights of Boston twinkle across the river. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire, my sister in Portland. "Gallery opening next month. Time for that fresh start you talked about?" I smiled, thinking about the opportunities ahead. The FBI had asked me to consult on other art fraud cases, putting my expertise to use in a way I'd never expected. Hannah had introduced me to legitimate art world contacts who were interested in my perspective on authentication and provenance verification. The life Ryan and Patricia had planned for me, the fall from grace, the public disgrace, the prison time, none of it had come to pass. Instead, I was building something new, something real, a genuine life built on truth instead of carefully constructed lies. Spring had finally arrived in Cambridge, bringing with it a sense of renewal as I settled into my role as an FBI art fraud consultant. The cherry blossoms along Memorial Drive painted the mornings in soft pink hues, a stark contrast to the gravity of the case files spread across my new home office. Agent Kendrick had just delivered another stack of documents needing my expertise in identifying potentially forged provenance certificates. My phone buzzed with a message from Claire in Portland. Another gallery had reached out about my upcoming exhibition on art authentication awareness. The irony wasn't lost on me. My traumatic experience had transformed me into something of an authority on detecting art world deception. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Hannah, clutching a manila envelope and wearing an expression that made my stomach drop. I hadn't seen her this concerned since the warehouse incident. "They're moving Patricia to a different facility," she said without preamble as she entered. "Maximum security. There was an attempt on her life yesterday." I gestured for her to sit at my small kitchen island while I poured us both coffee. "Someone doesn't want her to testify?" Hannah spread photographs across the counter. surveillance shots of unfamiliar faces entering and leaving high-end galleries across Europe. It's bigger than we thought, Emily. The Sullivans weren't just cleaning money for a few criminal organizations. They were part of a network, and that network is starting to unravel. Steam rose from my coffee cup as I studied the photographs. The faces were unfamiliar, but the galleries, I knew them well. Places I'd visited with Ryan during our marriage, always under the guise of expanding our collection or making connections for my curatorial work. This one, I pointed to a particular image, a distinguished-looking man leaving a gallery in Geneva. He attended our wedding, called himself Marcus Dubois, claimed to be a private collector from Brussels. Hannah pulled out her tablet, making notes. Real name is Viktor Petrov, Russian oligarch with ties to several organizations we're investigating. He's been instrumental in moving valuable pieces through the European black market. The scope of what I'd been unknowingly involved in made my head spin. Every gallery opening I'd attended, every private viewing I'd arranged, every acquisition I'd facilitated, how many had been genuine, and how many had been carefully orchestrated parts of their scheme. There's more, Hannah said quietly, pulling another document from her envelope. We found this in Patricia's private files during the latest raid. It was a photograph of me, taken 5 years ago at a small gallery in Portland. Long before, I'd met Ryan before I'd moved to Boston. I was talking to a patron, smiling, completely unaware of being photographed. They were watching me, I whispered. Even then, they chose you carefully, Emily. Your background in art history, your rising reputation in the gallery world, your clean record, you were perfect. They spent months vetting potential candidates before Ryan approached you. Anger flared in my chest, hot and fierce. The carefully orchestrated chance meeting at the Museum of Fine Arts, the whirlwind romance, the rushed marriage, all of it had been calculated, planned, designed to create their perfect pawn. A sharp knock at my door made us both jump. Hannah's hand moved to her hip where I knew she carried a concealed weapon, a necessary precaution since joining the investigation full-time. Through the peephole, I saw Agent Kendrick, her expression grim. Patricia's talking, she announced as soon as I let her in. Really talking. Names, dates, locations, everything. And some of what she's revealing. She paused, looking at me with concern. Emily, we need to move you. Tonight. My heart raced. What? Why? Because Patricia just revealed that the network had a contingency plan if their operation was exposed. A list of people to be eliminated to tie up loose ends. You're at the top of that list. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the counter to steady myself. But Ryan and Patricia are in custody. Their associates are being rounded up. This goes higher than the Sullivans, Hannah interjected. Much higher. The people behind this network, they're not just worried about the money laundering. They're worried about what you might have seen or heard during your marriage. Things you might not even realize are significant. Agent Kendrick was already on her phone, arranging security details. Hannah began quickly gathering essential documents from my desk. The peaceful spring morning had shattered into another nightmare. Pack light, Kendrick instructed. Clothes, essentials, anything you absolutely need. We're placing you in protective custody until we can neutralize the threat. As I moved through my apartment, throwing items into a bag, my mind raced. What had I seen? What conversations had I overheard? What seemingly innocent interactions now held deeper, darker meanings? A memory surfaced, a dinner party at our Beacon Hill home 8 months ago. Ryan had hosted several business associates in his study while I entertained their wives. One man had emerged briefly to take a phone call, speaking rapid-fire Russian, when he thought no one was nearby. I'd studied Russian art history. I understood enough to catch references to shipping manifests and customs declarations. The dinner party, I said suddenly. Last September. The men in Ryan's study. They weren't just discussing art acquisitions, were they? Hannah and Kendrick exchanged looks. What do you remember? I closed my eyes, trying to recall details. 8 men. One took a call, spoke about manifests. Another had papers. I glimpsed them when he left them on the hall table briefly. They had the letterhead of a shipping company, but the format was wrong for standard shipping documents. Did you get a name? Either the shipping company or any of the men? I shook my head, frustrated. The company logo had a blue anchor. The man with the papers. Thick accent, limped slightly. Ryan called him Constantine. Kendrick was rapidly typing notes into her phone. Konstantin Vasilyev, known associate of several trafficking organizations. The shipping company was probably Blue Anchor Maritime, a front for moving illegal goods through major ports. A crash from outside made us all freeze. Through my kitchen window, I saw a black van had stopped abruptly in front of my building, its side door sliding open. "Back door now," Hannah ordered, drawing her weapon. We rushed through my apartment and down the back stairs, emerging into the alley behind the building. The sound of footsteps echoed from above. Someone was following us. Kendrick's unmarked car was parked nearby. We piled in, Hannah taking the wheel while Kendrick provided cover. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of 2 men in dark suits emerging from the building, their frustrated expressions visible even from a distance. "They found you faster than we expected," Kendrick said grimly as Hannah navigated through Cambridge's narrow streets. They must have had someone watching the building. "Where are we going?" "Safe house outside the city. We'll figure out our next moves from there." My phone buzzed, Megan checking in about our planned dinner. With shaking hands, I sent her a quick message. "Taking a rain check. Work emergency." It felt wrong to lie to my best friend, but Kendrick had been clear. No one could know where I was going. The safe house turned out to be a modest cabin in the Berkshires, isolated enough to spot any approaching vehicles but close enough to civilization for quick support if needed. As Hannah did a perimeter check, Kendrick set up secure communications equipment. "We need to go through everything," she said, spreading files across the cabin's small dining table. "Every event you attended with Ryan, every person you met, every conversation you overheard. The smallest detail could be important." For hours, we pored over photographs, documents, and transcripts. I identified faces from gallery openings, matched names to conversations I'd witnessed, pointed out discrepancies in artwork provenance documents that had passed through my hands. "Look at this," Hannah said suddenly, pulling up a digital file on her laptop. "Records of art shipments from the gallery during your time as curator. The pieces match legitimate sales, but the shipping weights are off." I leaned in, scanning the manifests. "These paintings, they're all wrong. A canvas this size, even framed, shouldn't weigh this much." "They were hiding things inside the artwork," Kendrick confirmed. "Drugs, probably. Maybe other contraband. The legitimate art sales provided cover for smuggling operations." The revelation hit me hard. How many times had I signed off on shipping arrangements thinking I was simply doing my job? How many illegal shipments had I unknowingly facilitated? A notification popped up on Kendrick's secure laptop. New information from the FBI's interrogation of Patricia. Hannah read it first, her expression darkening. "Patricia's claiming there's a ledger," she said. "A complete record of the organization's operations, including names of corrupt officials, shipping routes, banking contacts, everything." "Where?" Kendrick demanded. "She says it's hidden in plain sight, in a piece of art." My mind raced through the countless pieces I'd handled during my marriage. Then I remembered the wedding gift from Patricia, an unremarkable modern art piece that Ryan had insisted we hang in his study. "The abstract in the study," I said. "Ryan would never let anyone move it, not even the cleaning service, said it was too valuable." Kendrick was already making calls, ordering a team to search the Beacon Hill house. But something was nagging at me about the painting. "Wait," I said. That piece. I saw Patricia having it reframed 2 months ago, at a small shop in the North End. Hannah's eyes widened. She moved the ledger, right before everything fell apart. The frame shop, I continued, memories surfacing. It wasn't just a frame shop. They had a restoration workshop in the back. I remember thinking it was odd for such a small place to have that kind of setup. Kendrick was already tracking the location on her phone. Got it. D'Angelo's Fine Art Services, owned by. Interesting. The property deed traces back to a shell company connected to Blue Anchor Maritime. A plan began to form. The frame shop would be watching for law enforcement, but they might not be watching for me, the supposedly naive curator, who'd never noticed anything suspicious during her marriage. I could go in, I offered. Just a former customer checking on an order. They might not know about my involvement in the investigation yet. Absolutely not, Hannah protested. It's too dangerous. But Kendrick looked thoughtful. Actually, this might be our best shot. If they have the ledger, they'll be planning to move it soon. A full raid would take time to organize, and we'd risk them destroying evidence. The next few hours were spent planning the operation. I would go in alone, wearing a concealed camera and microphone. Hannah and a tactical team would be nearby, ready to move if anything went wrong. As dusk approached, I found myself back in Cambridge, standing outside the small frame shop in the North End. Through the window, I could see the elderly owner, Mr. D'Angelo, working at his counter. Everything looked perfectly normal, perfectly innocent. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door, the small bell chiming just as it had 2 months ago when I'd accompanied Patricia. Mr. D'Angelo looked up, his weathered face showing just the right amount of polite recognition. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, then quickly corrected himself. "I'm sorry. Ms. Bennett now, isn't it? I heard about the unpleasantness with your husband. How can I help you today?" I forced a smile, playing the role of the wronged wife trying to move forward with her life. "I'm doing some redecorating, fresh start, you know. And I remembered how beautifully you reframed that piece for my mother-in-law. I was hoping you might be able to help me with a few pieces of my own." Mr. D'Angelo's weathered hands moved gracefully across his workbench as he showed me samples of ornate frames. His practiced patter about period-appropriate styles and conservation techniques might have fooled me once, but now I noticed how his eyes kept darting to the curtained doorway leading to the back workshop. "Perhaps we should look at some of the more specialized options in the back," he suggested, his Italian accent thickening slightly. Through my concealed earpiece, I heard Agent Kendrick's voice. "Remember, we need visual confirmation of the ledger. Don't spook him." I smiled, channeling the eager curator I'd once been. "That would be wonderful. Patricia mentioned you did some remarkable restoration work." As he led me through the curtained doorway, I took careful note of my surroundings. The workshop appeared legitimate at first glance. Proper ventilation systems, specialized tools, works in progress carefully arranged on padded tables. But there were subtle inconsistencies. The restoration equipment was pristine, barely used. The paintings awaiting work were all minor pieces, nothing that would require the sophisticated setup this place boasted. "Your mother-in-law was very particular about her framing needs," D'Angelo said as he moved toward a large cabinet. "Such a shame about her current situation." I forced myself to maintain my composure. "Yes, well, family can surprise you." The older man's hands stilled momentarily on the cabinet handle. "Indeed they can." He turned to face me fully, his grandfatherly demeanor slipping slightly. "You know, Ms. Bennett, I find myself wondering why you're really here." Through my earpiece, I heard Kendrick's voice tighten. "Stay calm. Teams are in position if needed. But something in Angelo's expression made me pause. Behind the suspicion, I caught a glimmer of fear. "I'm here because I want answers," I said softly, dropping the facade. And I think you're tired of keeping secrets. The old man's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. He glanced at a security camera mounted in the corner, then deliberately turned his back to it. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. They'll kill my granddaughter. They have her under surveillance in Florence. One phone call. My heart raced. Through my earpiece, I heard rapid discussions about locating the granddaughter, providing protection, but I kept my focus on D'Angelo. We can protect her, I promised, but I need to know about the ledger, the one Patricia brought here with that abstract painting. His eyes widened slightly. Before he could respond, a new voice cut through. The workshop. Uncle Giorgio, is everything all right? A younger man emerged from a back office, his expensive suit at odds with the workshop environment. I recognized him from Hannah's surveillance photos. Marco D'Angelo, nephew of the owner, and known associate of several European crime families. Everything's fine, Marco, the older man said quickly. Ms. Bennett is interested in some restoration work. Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. Ah, the former Mrs. Sullivan. How unexpected. He moved closer, deliberately placing himself between me and the exit. You know, it's interesting you should come here today. I was just speaking with some associates about you. Marco, please, his uncle began, but fell silent at a sharp look from his nephew. The thing is, Marco continued, circling me slowly, we've been trying to determine exactly how much you know. Patricia insists you were just a convenient puppet, unaware of the true nature of the business. But Ryan... Well, Ryan thinks you were cleverer than that. I heard Kendrick in my ear. Teams moving into position. Keep him talking. I was an art curator doing my job, I said firmly. Nothing more. Marco chuckled. An art curator who just happened to walk into this particular frame shop? Who just happened to ask about a specific painting? His hand moved toward his jacket pocket. I don't believe in such coincidences. The next few moments happened in a blur. Giorgio D. Angelo suddenly stumbled forward, knocking into his nephew. In the brief confusion, I saw him slip something into a nearby empty frame, a small leather-bound book. Marco shoved his uncle aside, reaching for what I now saw was a weapon in his jacket. But before he could draw it, the workshop's front, windows exploded inward as FBI tactical teams made their entry. FBI, hands where we can see them. Marco tried to run but was quickly tackled. Giorgio remained where he'd fallen, his hands raised. And I moved faster than I'd ever moved, grabbing the frame that concealed the book. Hours later, in a secure FBI location, I watched through a one-way mirror as agents interviewed Giorgio D'Angelo. His granddaughter had been located and placed under protection, allowing him to finally speak freely. The ledger is extraordinary, Hannah said, joining me at the window. Names, dates, locations, the entire network laid bare. D'Angelo was their record keeper, using the frame shop as a front for documenting transactions. He kept records because he needed insurance, I realized, to protect his family. And now those records will help us dismantle the entire organization. But something still nagged at me. It feels too easy, I said. Marco could have killed me in the workshop. Why didn't he? Hannah's expression grew serious. Because you were being used as bait. They wanted to see who would come after you, what law enforcement agencies would be involved. We've been playing into their hands. As if to emphasize her point, alarms suddenly blared through the building. Red emergency lights began flashing in the hallway. Security breach in the parking garage, a voice announced over the intercom. All personnel initiate lockdown procedures. Hannah drew her weapon, positioning herself between me and the door. Through the window, I saw agents rushing Giorgio D'Angelo toward a secure room. They're here for the ledger, I said, my heart pounding. And everyone who's seen it. Secondary exit route, Hannah commanded, leading me toward a hidden door disguised as a storage cabinet. We need to get you out of the building. We emerged into a maintenance corridor, emergency lights casting everything in a red glow. The sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere above us. The ledger is a fake, I gasped as we ran. It has to be. The real one is still out there. Hannah nodded grimly, which means we're still missing something big. We reached a service elevator that would take us to an underground tunnel system. As Hannah pressed the call button, I frantically reviewed everything in my mind. The frame shop, the paintings, Patricia's careful planning. Wait, I said suddenly. The abstract painting, the one from the study. We never found it after. Patricia had it reframed. Because it wasn't important, Hannah said. The ledger was what mattered. No, you don't understand. That painting, I studied it for 3 years. It was always slightly different each time I looked at it. The colors seemed to shift. The texture changed. Hannah's eyes widened as she understood. It wasn't one painting. They were switching them out regularly. The frames stayed the same, but the canvases, they were using them to move information. The ledger was never a book. It was the paintings themselves. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. As we stepped inside, Hannah was already on. Her phone, calling Kendrick. The D'Angelo frame shop wasn't just a drop point. It was a copying center. They were creating multiple versions of the same painting, each one containing different parts of their records. And I think I know where they are, I said, remembering something from my early days with Ryan. The Sullivan family has a private art storage facility in South Boston, climate-controlled, highly secure. I was only there once, but I remember seeing dozens of identical frames. The elevator reached the underground level just as an explosion rocked the building above us. Through the tunnel, we could hear vehicles screeching in the parking garage. They're not just here for the ledger, Hannah realized. They're destroying evidence. The whole operation is being cleaned up. We ran through the tunnel, emerging into a secondary parking area where an unmarked FBI vehicle waited. Hannah took the wheel, speeding us out into the Boston night. South. Boston, she said, her voice tense. Call it in. We need teams there now. But as we merged onto the highway, I noticed something in the rearview mirror. We're being followed. 2 black SUVs. Hannah swerved suddenly, taking an exit at the last possible moment. The SUVs followed. They knew we'd figure it out. They were waiting for us to lead them to the storage facility. The chase through Boston streets was a nightmare of screeching tires and near misses. Hannah's tactical driving training was put to the test as our pursuers tried to force us off the roadie. There's another option, I said, gripping the dashboard as we took another sharp turn. The paintings might not all be in storage. Ryan was paranoid about keeping things close. The townhouse has already been searched, Hannah pointed out. Not the walls, I said. The abstract paintings we displayed weren't just art. They were hiding places, removable panels disguised as modern art. Hannah made a split-second decision, turning the car toward Beacon Hill. As we raced through the darkened streets, I remembered all the times Ryan had insisted on hanging certain pieces in specific places. How he'd been adamant about the lighting, the temperature control. We reached the townhouse to find it dark and seemingly deserted. The FBI seal on the door had been broken. Someone's already here, Hannah whispered as we approached cautiously. Through my earpiece, I could hear Kendrick coordinating backup teams, but they were still minutes away. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was eerily silent. Our footsteps seemed impossibly loud on the hardwood floors as we made our way to Ryan's study. The abstract painting was gone from its usual place, leaving a telling blank space on the wall. But there was something else, a faint light coming from behind where it had hung. Hannah moved forward with her weapon ready. Behind the painting's mounting had been a small safe, now standing open. Inside was a laptop, its screen glowing softly. Before we could reach it, a voice spoke from the doorway. I wondered who would figure it out first. We spun to find Patricia Sullivan standing there, looking elegant despite her prison jumpsuit. Behind her, 2 armed men blocked the exit. The paintings were clever, she said, moving into the room. But the real records were always digital, hidden in plain sight, backed up in pieces across multiple canvases. The physical ledger was just a distraction. How did you get out of custody? Hannah demanded, her weapon trained on Patricia. Oh, honey. Did you really think a woman like me wouldn't have contingency plans? Guards can be bought. Systems can be bypassed. She gestured to the laptop. Everything you want to know is right there. The question is, what are you going to do with that information? I studied the woman who had orchestrated so much of my life, who had chosen me as her son's wife specifically to be their scapegoat. Why are you showing us this? Patricia's smile was cold. Because sometimes the best way to protect information is to release it carefully, strategically. The organization is being dismantled as we speak. Those who can be sacrificed will be. Those who can't, well, they're already gone. You're cutting deals, Hannah realized, using the information to bargain for protection. Smart girl. Now, shall we discuss terms? But something in Patricia's tone made me pause. This was too easy. The Patricia I knew never showed her full hand. I moved closer to the laptop, studying its screen. The files displayed were exactly what we'd expect to find: transaction records, contact lists, shipping manifests. It's another fake, I said suddenly. Just like the ledger, the real information is somewhere else. Patricia's composed expression flickered slightly. The laptop now, one of the armed men demanded, stepping forward. Hannah kept her weapon steady. FBI backup is already on the way. They won't make it in time, Patricia said calmly. Last chance. Give us the laptop, and you both walk away. In that moment, I noticed something about the laptop screen, a faint reflection in its glossy surface. There was another painting behind us, one I'd never paid much attention to. But now, looking at its reflection, I could see what I'd missed before. The real data is in the art itself, I said. Microscopic markings in the paint, visible only under specific light conditions. The laptop is just an interface. Patricia's mask cracked completely. Take them, she commanded. But Hannah was faster. She fired 2 precise shots, taking down the armed men before they could raise their weapons. Patricia turned to run, but found herself face to face with Agent Kendrick and a tactical team coming up the back stairs. Patricia Sullivan, Kendrick said, her voice satisfied as she applied handcuffs. You're under arrest. Again. In the aftermath, as FBI tech teams carefully removed paintings from the walls of every Sullivan property, the true scope of the operation became clear. Each canvas contained encoded data, visible only under specific conditions. Together, they formed a complete record of decades of criminal enterprises. They'll still try to reach you, Hannah warned me as we watched the sun rise over Boston Harbor. You know too much now. I thought about the life I'd had, the life that had been carefully constructed for me, and the life I might build now. Let them try, I said. I'm done being afraid. The August sun blazed through the windows of my temporary office at the FBI's Art Crime Division in Boston. 3 months had passed since we'd discovered the encoded paintings in the Sullivan properties, yet each day brought new revelations. Today's discovery sat on my desk. A seemingly innocent exhibition catalog from a gallery in Vienna, its pages containing hidden references to a vast network of art forgeries. Agent Kendrick leaned against my desk, frowning at the latest forensics. Report. The encryption method in these paintings is unlike anything we've seen before. Each brushstroke contains microscopic patterns, visible only under specific light frequencies. The level of sophistication suggests government involvement. My phone buzzed. Another message from Claire in Portland. She'd been begging me to come visit, to take a break from the investigation. But how could I step away when we were finally uncovering the truth? Hannah burst into the office, her face flushed with excitement. "We found him," she announced, dropping a file on my desk. "The artist who created the encoded paintings. He's been living under an assumed name in Montreal." The file contained a photograph that made my blood run cold. I recognized the man. He'd been at my wedding, introduced as a distant cousin of Patricia's. He'd given us a painting as a gift, one I'd always found oddly mesmerizing. The photograph showed a man in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, working in a sunlit studio. Thomas Laurent, as he called himself now, had once been Mikhail Petrov, one of Russia's most talented art forgers, but his true genius lay not in copying masterpieces, but in hiding information within original works. "The painting he gave you, at your wedding," Hannah said, pulling up an image on her tablet. "We found traces of data embedded in the pigments. Dates, locations, names. It was basically a coded schedule of planned operations for the next 3 years." I remembered how that painting had hung in our living room, its swirling abstract patterns seeming to shift in different lights. How many times had I sat beneath it, completely unaware of the secrets hidden in its surface? A knock at my office door interrupted my thoughts. Agent Kendrick entered with a tall, elegant woman I recognized immediately. Isabella Romano, curator of the prestigious Romano Gallery in Florence. My heart rate quickened. The Romano Gallery had been a frequent partner in exhibitions with my former gallery. "Ms. Bennett?" Isabella said, her Italian accent thick with concern. "I came as soon as I received the FBI's request. I believe we have much to discuss about certain acquisitions over the past 5 years." For the next 2 hours, Isabella shared details that filled in crucial gaps in our investigation. The Romano Gallery had unknowingly been used as a clearinghouse for the organization's forgeries. But more disturbing were her revelations about my own former workplace. "Your predecessor as curator," Isabella said carefully, "did not leave for health reasons as you were told. She discovered something about the gallery's connection to certain private collectors. A week later, she died in what appeared to be a hiking accident in the Alps. The implications hit me like a physical blow. I'd been hired not just as a potential scapegoat, but as a replacement for someone who'd gotten too close to the truth. Had Ryan known? Had that been part of his calculation in choosing me? Hannah's phone buzzed with an urgent message. "The Montreal team is ready to move on Laurent's studio," she reported. "But there's a complication. He's scheduled to fly to Geneva tonight." "We can't let him leave the country," Kendrick said firmly. "That painting he gave you at your wedding? We need him to decode it completely. There could be operations still in play, people in danger." Isabella leaned forward, her expression grave. "There is something else you should know. The technique Laurent uses for encoding information. It was not entirely his invention. It was developed by a group of artists during World War II, used to hide information about looted artworks. My grandfather was one of them." This revelation opened up an entirely new dimension to our investigation. The methodology hadn't just been used for criminal enterprises. It had a noble origin, a way to track and eventually restore stolen art to its rightful owners. "The technique was supposed to die with that generation," Isabella continued, "but somehow the organization discovered it. They took something meant to restore justice and perverted it for their own purposes." A plan began to form in my mind. "Laurent's not just an artist," I said slowly. "He's a craftsman, proud of his work. If we approach him right—" "No," Hannah interrupted firmly. "It's too dangerous. Let the Montreal team handle his arrest." But I pressed on. He knows. Me. He's seen my own work as a curator. If anyone can convince him to share his knowledge voluntarily, to help us use his technique for its original purpose. Kendrick considered this for a long moment. We'd need to move fast, set up a controlled meeting before his flight. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. A private jet was arranged to fly us to Montreal. Isabella agreed to accompany us. Her connection to the technique's history could be crucial in persuading Laurent to cooperate. As we flew north, I studied the file on Laurent's recent activities. The Montreal studio had been his base for the past decade, but he'd traveled frequently, always coinciding with major art world events. Each trip likely represented another encoded painting delivered, another piece of the organization's communications network. There's something else, Hannah said quietly, showing me a recent surveillance photo. Look who visited his studio last week. My breath caught. The photo showed Marco D'Angelo, the nephew from the frame shop, entering Laurent's building. But he wasn't alone. With him was someone I hadn't seen in weeks, Ryan. How is he out? I demanded. He was denied bail. He isn't out, Kendrick said grimly. Not officially. We're dealing with corruption at levels we hadn't imagined. Someone helped him escape custody, arrange this meeting. The implications were staggering. Even with Patricia in maximum security, even with the organization supposedly being dismantled, key players were still operating freely. Our plane landed in Montreal as evening was falling. The city sparkled beneath a light summer rain, its streets busy with tourists and locals enjoying the warm night. Laurent's studio was located in a converted warehouse in the Old Port District. The surveillance team reported that he was inside, alone. No sign of Ryan or Marco. We set up in a cafe across the street, watching the building's entrance while finalizing our approach. Let me go in first, I insisted. If he sees law enforcement, he might destroy evidence, or worse, activate some kind of fail-safe in the encoded paintings. You'll wear a wire, Kendrick said. It wasn't a question. And at the first sign of trouble. I know. I touched the small pendant around my neck, actually a high-tech tracking and recording device. I've learned a few things about being prepared. Isabella squeezed my hand. Remember, the technique was created to preserve truth, not hide. Perhaps that will reach whatever conscience he has left. The studio entrance was unmarked, just a heavy metal door with a sophisticated security panel. I pressed the intercom, speaking in French as we'd planned. Monsieur Laurent, it's Emily Bennett. We met at my wedding to Ryan Sullivan. I need to speak with you about your gift. There was a long pause, then a soft buzz as the door unlocked. Inside, a freight elevator took me to the top floor. The studio space was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the St. Lawrence River. Canvases in various stages of completion were arranged throughout the space, each one potentially containing encrypted data about criminal operations worldwide. Laurent stood at a workbench cleaning brushes. He looked older than in the surveillance photos, more tired. But his eyes were sharp as they met mine. I wondered when you would come, he said in perfect English. You understand now? About the paintings? I understand that you used a technique meant to restore stolen art to instead help criminals hide their activities, I replied. What I don't understand is why. He set down his brushes, moving to a canvas covered by a cloth. Do you know what happened to the original artists who developed this method? The ones who tried to track Nazi-looted art? Most died mysteriously. A few disappeared. The message was clear. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep. And now, you're still hiding secrets for people who kill to protect them. Laurent pulled the cloth from the canvas, revealing an abstract work in progress. Look closely, he said. What do you see? I stepped forward, studying the painting. The pattern seemed to move, shift. It's active, I realized. You're encoding something right now. Names, he said quietly. Dates. Evidence of corruption at the highest levels of law enforcement and government. Insurance, in case they try to silence me like they silence the others. Through my earpiece, I heard Kendrick ordering teams to move into position. But something about Laurent's demeanor made me wave them off. "The painting you gave me at my wedding," I said. "What was in it?" A warning. He moved to a computer station, typing rapidly. "Everything about you, your background, your career, trajectory, your relationship with Ryan. I saw how they were positioning you. I encoded the truth, hoping you would somehow discover it in time. Why didn't you just tell me directly?" His laugh was bitter. "And end up like your predecessor?" "No, I encoded it in a way that would only become visible once certain events were set in motion. The pigments react to specific environmental changes, like the kind that occur during police evidence processing." A noise from the stairwell made us both turn. Laurent's expression changed to one of fear. "They're here," he said urgently. "Ryan must have known I would talk to you." "The FBI has the building surrounded," I assured him. "You don't understand. The FBI isn't the only ones watching." He pressed a flash drive into my hand. "Everything is here. The original technique, documentation of every painting I encoded for them, proof of who's really running the organization. Get it to Isabella Romano. Her grandfather helped create this method. She'll know what to do with." Before I could respond, the studio windows exploded inward as armed figures rappelled from the roof. Smoke grenades filled the air as Laurent pushed me toward a hidden panel in the wall. "Go," he ordered. "They can't find this drive. It's what Ryan was really looking for last week." The last thing I saw before the panel closed was Laurent facing the intruders, a defiant smile on his face as he pressed a button on his computer. Throughout the studio, paintings began to change color, their hidden data becoming visible as some final failsafe activated. The hidden passage behind Laurent's studio wall led to a narrow maintenance corridor, dimly lit by emergency lights. Gunfire and shouts echoed behind me as I clutched the flash drive, my lifeline to uncovering the truth. The corridor ended at a service elevator, ancient and industrial. As I pulled the metal gate closed, an explosion rocked the building. Through my earpiece, I could hear the chaos unfolding in the studio above. Hannah's voice cut through the static. "Emily, get to the extraction point." Laurent triggered some kind of chemical reaction in his paintings. The entire floor is filling with toxic fumes. My heart raced as the elevator groaned downward. Laurent had sacrificed himself and his work to protect whatever was on this drive. The weight of it in my pocket felt like a ticking bomb. The elevator opened to a sub-basement that smelled of river water and age. A faint gleam of light showed where the passage met the old port's tunnel system. As I moved toward it, a familiar voice emerged from the shadows. "Hello, Emily?" Ryan stepped into view, his prison-pale skin ghostly in the dim light. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The flash drive seemed to burn in my pocket as Ryan advanced, his familiar smile now twisted into something predatory. Behind me, water lapped at the tunnel walls, offering a dark escape into the labyrinth beneath Montreal's old port. "The paintings are destroyed," I said, playing for time while scanning for options. "Whatever secrets you were trying to protect." "The paintings were a distraction," Ryan cut in. "Insurance policies, really, but that drive..." He extended his hand. "That contains something far more valuable. Hand it over, and maybe we can work something out, for old time's sake." A metallic scrape behind him caught my attention. Marco D'Angelo emerging from another tunnel, blocking my retreat. The operation to take the studio had been a setup. They'd known Laurent would contact me, had been waiting for him to reveal the drive's location. "You're looking well," I said to Ryan, noting his tailored suit. "Prison seems to agree with you. Or should I say, pretending to be in prison?" He chuckled. Having friends in high places does have its advantages. The same friends who are very interested in recovering that drive before anyone can decrypt its contents. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, the sound matching my racing pulse. Through my earpiece, I could hear Hannah coordinating teams to search the tunnel system, but they'd never reach me in time. "What's on it?" I asked, my hand closing around the drive in my pocket. "What could be worth all this?" "The truth about who really runs things," Marco answered, moving closer. "Not just the art fraud operation, but everything. Governments, corporations, law enforcement, the whole machine." Ryan's eyes glittered in the dim light. "Think about it, Emily. Why do you think I chose you? Your skills as a curator were useful, yes, but it was your background in art history, your specific knowledge of World War II art recovery methods that made you perfect." The pieces began falling into place. The encoding technique, it wasn't just about hiding current operations. You were using it to hide historical evidence. "Very good," Ryan praised, as if I were still his naive wife making a clever observation at a gallery opening. Laurent's method allowed us to hide documentation that could rewrite history. Proof of collaborations, deals made in shadows, bloodlines that connect today's power brokers to some very uncomfortable truths. A distant explosion above made dust rain from the tunnel ceiling. The chemical reaction Laurent had triggered was spreading. "Enough talking," Marco snapped, drawing a weapon. "The drive now." In that moment, I felt the weight of everything. My sham marriage, the manipulation, the lives destroyed to protect these secrets. With one fluid motion, I pulled the drive from my pocket and hurled it toward the water. Ryan lunged for it, but Marco's shot rang out first. The bullet grazed my arm as I dove behind a concrete pillar. The drive clattered on the ground, sliding toward a drain grate. What happened next was chaos. The tunnel filled with smoke as FBI teams finally breached from multiple directions. Ryan and Marco returned fire. I scrambled for the drive, my fingers closing around it just as a hand grabbed my injured arm. "Did you really think I'd let you destroy everything we built?" Ryan's voice was close to my ear, his grip bruising. "That I'd let you walk away with the power to expose them?" I drove my elbow back, connecting with his solar plexus. As he stumbled, I saw something I'd missed before. A small boat tethered in a side channel, obviously their planned escape route. "Emily!" Hannah's voice cut through the gunfire. "The tunnels are flooding. They've blown the water main." Water was already ankle-deep and rising fast. Ryan recovered, lunging for me again, but years of rage and betrayal fueled my response. We grappled for the drive as the water rose, neither willing to let go of the truth it contained. "You never understood," Ryan gasped as we struggled. This was bigger than us, bigger than the art world. The people we work for, they shape reality itself. "No," I shot back, twisting away from his grip. "You never understood. The truth always finds a way out." A fresh burst of gunfire sent us both diving for cover. In the chaos, I saw Marco trying to reach the boat, only to be cut down by FBI fire. Ryan used the distraction to tackle me, the drive falling from my grasp into the rising water. Time seemed to slow as we both watched it sink, disappearing into the murky depths. Ryan's face contorted with fury. His hands found my throat, pressing me back against the tunnel wall as water swirled around our legs. "You've ruined everything," he snarled. Again. My vision began to darken at the edges, but suddenly Ryan's weight was gone. Hannah had arrived, her precise strike sending him stumbling into the deepening water. More agents swarmed in, securing him as Hannah pulled me to safety. "The drive," I coughed, trying to return to the spot where it had fallen. "We have to find it." "No time," Hannah insisted, leading me toward higher ground. "This whole section is about to flood." As we escaped the tunnels, I looked back one last time. Ryan was being led away in handcuffs. but something in his expression made me uneasy. He was too calm, almost satisfied despite his capture. Hours later, in a secure FBI facility, I sat wrapped in a blanket as medical personnel treated my injured arm. Agent Kendrick paced, coordinating dive teams to search for the drive while interrogators worked on Ryan and the surviving members of his team. Laurent didn't make it, Hannah reported grimly, entering with fresh coffee. The fumes from the paintings. He knew what would happen when he triggered the reaction, but he managed to destroy every encoded canvas. Whatever they were hiding in the art is gone. I stared into my coffee, thinking about Laurent's final actions. He said, the drive contained names, evidence of corruption, but Ryan said it was something bigger, historical documents that could rewrite history. We'll find it, Kendrick assured me. The tunnel system is contained. It's just a matter of time. But something nagged at me about Ryan's calm demeanor, about the way he'd seemed almost pleased when the drive was lost. What if that's what they wanted? I said slowly. What if ensuring the drive was lost in the flood was their real goal? Hannah and Kendrick exchanged looks. You think the whole operation was a setup? Think about it, I continued, the pieces falling into place. Ryan escapes custody. Make sure we know he's meeting Laurent. Laurent gives me the drive but sends me into a tunnel system they controlled. They must have known about the FBI surveillance, the backup teams. They wanted us to think we were close to exposing everything, Kendrick realized, while the real evidence, the real secrets, are somewhere else entirely, I finished. The drive was a decoy, important enough to be convincing, but not their true insurance policy. Isabella Romano, who had been quietly observing from the corner, finally spoke. The original encoding technique, developed during the war, it wasn't just used on paintings. My grandfather's notes mentioned other methods, ways of hiding information in plain sight, in objects that would never be suspected. A thought struck me. The frame shop, not just the one in Boston, but others, like it around the world. They weren't just fronts for money laundering. They were creating hiding places, encoding data into the frames themselves. Which means every painting we've recovered, every piece we thought might contain evidence. Hannah trailed off. We were looking at the wrong part, I said. The art was just the cover. The frames are the real archive. Kendrick was already on her phone, ordering teams to re-examine every piece of art recovered from Sullivan properties, worldwide. But I had a sinking feeling we were still missing something. I thought about the painting Laurent had given us as a wedding gift, about how Ryan had insisted on having it reframed at D'Angelo's shop shortly after, about all the other paintings in our home that had been regularly reframed for conservation purposes. The frames would need to be processed somehow, Isabella mused. Treated with specific chemicals, exposed to certain conditions. Like a flood, I said suddenly. Water damage would be the perfect excuse to have pieces reframed. And if the frames were designed to react to water exposure. Understanding dawned on their faces. The tunnel flooding hadn't been about destroying evidence. It had been about activating it. Somewhere in the chaos, something had been revealed, transformed, or transmitted. We need to get back to that frame shop, I insisted, standing despite my exhaustion. Not just to find evidence, but to understand their method. If they're using frames to hide their archive, there must be thousands of them out there, in museums and private collections around the world. It's too dangerous, Hannah protested. They'll be watching all known locations. Then we don't go to a known location, Isabella interjected. My family. We weren't the only ones who knew about these techniques. There are others, people, who protected these secrets, waiting for the right time to reveal them. Where? Kendrick asked. Isabella pulled out her phone, showing us an image of an old monastery in the Italian Alps. This is where my grandfather worked during the war, developing the original encoding methods. The monks there, they've been guardians of these secrets for generations. If we want to understand what we're really dealing with, that's where we need to go. I looked at the image of the monastery, perched precariously on a mountainside. Ryan's words echoed in my mind. The people we work for, they shape reality itself. Whatever truth was hidden in those frames, whatever secrets were encoded in galleries and museums around the world, uncovering them would mean challenging the very foundations of power. But staring at my reflection in the window, seeing the bruises forming on my throat from Ryan's attack, I knew I had no choice. This had stopped being about revenge or justice. It was about exposing a system of control that had existed in the shadows for generations. The ancient monastery loomed before us, its stone walls seeming to grow straight from the mountainside. Our small helicopter had landed on a narrow plateau, the only flat ground visible for miles in the Italian Alps. Isabella led our group, myself, Hannah, and Agent Kendrick, toward a heavy wooden door weathered by centuries of harsh mountain winds. Few outsiders have ever entered San Lorenzo's walls, Isabella said, her breath visible in the thin, cold air. The monks here are the keepers of many secrets, not just those of art and war. Before she could knock, the door swung open. An elderly monk in a brown habit stood in the entrance, his keen eyes taking in our group. He spoke rapidly in Italian to Isabella, who responded with what sounded like a code phrase. The monk's expression shifted from suspicion to grave concern. "Benvenuti," he said, stepping aside. "I am Brother Marcus. We have been expecting you." The monastery's interior was a maze of stone corridors lit by a mixture of ancient torches and modern LED lights, a jarring contrast of old and new. As we followed Brother Marcus deeper into the complex, I noticed something peculiar about the frames around the religious artwork that lined the walls. Each one bore subtle markings, almost invisible unless you knew to look for them. "The frames," Brother Marcus said, noting my attention. "Each tells a story beyond the artwork it holds, stories that could never be written in books or spoken aloud." He led us to a massive library where wooden shelves stretched toward vaulted ceilings. Ancient manuscripts shared space with modern computer equipment. An elderly woman sat at a workbench, examining a frame under specialized lighting. She looked up as we entered, her eyes widening at the sight of Isabella. "Sophia's granddaughter," she breathed, standing shakily. "You look just like her." "Dr. Elena Rossi," Isabella introduced her. "She worked with my grandfather during the war. She's the last living member of the original encoding team." Dr. Rossi beckoned us closer to her workbench. Under the specialized lights, the frame she was examining revealed intricate patterns invisible to the naked eye. "Your husband's organization," she said, looking directly at me. "They discovered our techniques by accident. A frame from a looted painting that reacted unexpectedly during cleaning. They spent years reverse engineering our methods, but they never understood their true purpose." She pressed a button, changing the light frequency. New patterns emerged in the frame, forming what looked like lines of text in multiple languages. During the war, we didn't just track looted art. We recorded everything. Collaborations, secret agreements, bloodlines of power, insurance, we thought, against history repeating itself. "But it did repeat," Brother Marcus interjected. "The same families, the same organizations, just wearing different masks. The art world became their perfect cover. Unregulated, international, dealing in objects worth millions yet easily transported." Hannah leaned in to examine the frame. "These patterns, they're similar to what we found in Laurent's paintings, but more complex." "Laurent was brilliant but limited," Dr. Rossi said. "He could encode data, yes, but he never understood the full capability of the technique. These frames don't just store information. They can transmit it when exposed to specific conditions." "Like water," I said, thinking of the flooded tunnels in Montreal. Dr. Rossi nodded. or heat, light, even certain sound frequencies. The monks have been maintaining a network of these frames for decades, waiting for the right moment to activate them. And now? Agent Kendrick asked. Brother Marcus moved to a modern computer setup. We've been tracking unusual activities in museums and private collections worldwide. Someone is systematically collecting frames from a specific period, 1943 to 1947, the years when our team was most active. Ryan's organization, I realized, they're not just hiding their own secrets, they're trying to control access to historical evidence that could expose their origins. Dr. Rossi picked up an old photograph, showing a group of people working in what looked like an art restoration workshop. Your grandfather, she said to Isabella, he discovered something in 1944, a connection between certain prominent families and both sides of the war. Evidence of deals made that shaped the post-war world order. We encoded it across multiple frames, scattered them throughout Europe. The flood in Montreal, Hannah said suddenly. If these frames can transmit data when exposed to water, it wasn't about destroying evidence, I finished. They were activating the frames, receiving data they've spent years collecting. Brother Marcus typed rapidly at his computer, bringing up a map marked with pulsing red dots. We've detected increased activity in the network over the past 48 hours. Something is building. A convergence of data we haven't seen since 1945. How much time do we have? Kendrick demanded. Hours, maybe, Dr. Rossi replied. Once they have all the frames they need, once the data transmission is complete, they'll destroy the originals. All evidence of what really happened, who really shaped the world we live in, gone forever. Isabella studied the map intently. These locations, they're not just museums. Some are private residences, government buildings, places where power truly resides, Brother Marcus said grimly. The art world was always just their cover. The true purpose of their network is control, of information, of history itself. Dr. Rossi stood shakily, moving to a wall safe hidden behind a portrait. There's something you need to see. She withdrew a small wooden box, its surface covered in the same subtle markings as the frames. This contains the key to decoding everything, not just the historical data, but their current operations, their real identities, their plans. As she held out the box, the library's stained glass windows suddenly shattered inward. Black-clad, figures repelled through the openings as alarms blared throughout the monastery. Hannah pushed me behind a shelf as gunfire erupted. "Protect the box!" Dr. Rossi shouted, shoving it into my hands before a bullet struck her shoulder. Brother Marcus dragged her to cover while Kendrick and Hannah returned fire. Isabella grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a hidden door behind one of the shelves. "The catacombs," she shouted over the chaos. "We can reach the old bell tower." We raced through narrow stone passages, the sounds of fighting echoing behind us. The box felt warm in my hands, its markings seeming to pulse with a faint light. We emerged into the bell tower just as helicopters appeared outside, searchlights cutting through the alpine night. "They've found us," a familiar voice said. Ryan stepped from the shadows, his gun trained on us. "Did you really think we wouldn't track you here? That we wouldn't know about the monastery's role?" Two more armed men emerged on either side of him. Through the tower's window, I could see more helicopters approaching. In the library below, the gunfire had stopped. "Hand over the box, Emily," Ryan said calmly. "It's over. The data transfer from Montreal is almost complete. Once we have the decoding key, the frames will be worthless. Just ancient wood and gilding, their secrets lost forever." Isabella stepped forward. "You don't understand what you're destroying. This isn't just about power or control. These records, they're proof of humanity's darkest moments, insurance against repeating our worst mistakes." Ryan laughed. "Mistakes? Every deal encoded in those frames, every secret agreement and hidden bloodline, They all served a purpose: order, stability, progress. The world needs its shadows, Emily. It needs people willing to shape history from behind the scenes. No, I said, clutching the box tighter. The world needs truth. It needs light in those shadows. The box was growing warmer, its markings definitely glowing now. Ryan noticed too, his eyes widening. The water damage in Montreal, he realized. It didn't just activate the frames there, it created a cascade effect through the entire network. The monastery's frames are responding to the data surge. A deep resonance began building in the tower, the ancient bell above us vibrating with increasing intensity. The markings on the box flared brightly. "Stop them!" Ryan shouted to his men. "The box is transmitting." But before they could reach us, the bell began to toll. Not from any human action, but from the resonance of centuries of hidden data finally breaking free. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a frequency that seemed to pierce through time itself. Around us, the monastery's frames began to glow, their encoded secrets awakening. Through the windows, we could see similar lights appearing in the valley below, spreading outward like a wave of revelation. Ryan launched himself toward me, trying to grab the box, but Isabella intercepted him. They struggled as the bell's resonance grew stronger. The armed men raised their weapons, but the tower itself seemed to be shaking apart, stones falling as centuries of compressed truth fought for release. "Emily!" Hannah's voice carried up from below. "The monastery's frames. They're broadcasting everything. Museums worldwide are reporting their frames are activating. It's too late to stop it." Ryan screamed in frustration, shoving Isabella aside and leveling his gun at me. "I won't let you destroy everything we built." But his shot went wide as more stones fell. The tower was becoming unstable, the bell's frequency reaching a fever pitch. The box in my hands was now almost too hot to hold, its markings blazing with blue-white light. "The truth," I said, meeting Ryan's desperate gaze, "always finds a way out." The bell gave one final massive toll. The box's markings flared blindingly bright, and the world seemed to hold its breath for one eternal moment. Then the wave of light expanding from the monastery reached some critical threshold, and the night exploded with the light of buried truths finally exposed. As consciousness faded, my last thought was of Laurent's words. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep, but perhaps some secrets are too important to stay hidden. The headlines flashed across every news network worldwide. Massive data leak exposes centuries of hidden power structures. 2 weeks had passed since the night at San Lorenzo Monastery, and I watched from a secure location in Geneva as the world grappled with the revelations. The ancient bell tower's final toll had triggered a cascade of information releases from encoded frames in museums, private collections, and government buildings across the globe. Dr. Rossi had survived her wound and now sat beside me in our makeshift command center, her arm in a sling as she helped decode the streams of data still emerging from activated frames. The scope of what had been hidden was staggering, not just art world fraud, but centuries of carefully orchestrated world events. "Another frame activated in the Louvre," Hannah reported, entering with fresh coffee. "This one contains documentation of post-war agreements we never knew existed. Entire governments built on foundations of secrets and lies." The wall of monitors before us showed chaos erupting in capitals worldwide. Protests filled the streets as people demanded answers about their true history. Several high-ranking officials had already resigned. Others had disappeared, presumably fleeing to prepared safe havens. My phone buzzed with a message from Isabella, who was coordinating with her network of art historians to authenticate the revealed documents. Vatican frames beginning to respond, centuries of hidden records emerging. This goes deeper than anyone imagined. Ryan had vanished in the monastery's collapse, along with several of his men. But the organization's power structure was crumbling. As each frame activated, more names were exposed, more connections revealed. The carefully constructed, shadow world he'd served was being dragged into the light. A commotion at the command center's entrance drew my attention. Agent Kendrick rushed in, her face pale. "We found something in Patricia's private files. Something about your family, Emily. Your real family." I stared at the file Kendrick had brought, my mind struggling to process its contents. Old photographs and documents spilled across the table. Images of my parents, but not from their life in Portland. These showed them in places and situations that contradicted everything I'd known about my family history. "Your parents weren't who they claimed to be," Kendrick said gently. "They were caretakers, guardians of some of the original encoded frames from World War II. Your father's real name was Andreas Müller. He was part of a network dedicated to protecting these secrets until the right time came to reveal them." The room seemed to spin as I picked up a photograph. My father, much younger, standing in front of a Swiss bank with a group of serious-looking men. The date stamp showed 1985, a year before I was born. "The Sullivan organization didn't choose you at random," Dr. Rossi added, her good hand touching my arm. "They discovered your connection to the original Guardians. Your marriage to Ryan wasn't just about creating a scapegoat. It was about infiltrating the last remnants of our network." Hannah pulled up more files on the main screen. "Your acceptance into art school, your career path in gallery curation. None of it was accidental. They'd been watching your family for years, waiting for the right moment to strike." A wave of nausea hit me as memories realigned themselves. My father's insistence that I study art history. The mysterious business trips he'd taken throughout my childhood. The way he'd reacted when I'd first told him about Ryan, not with joy, but with carefully concealed fear. Does this mean... I couldn't finish the question. "Your parents are alive," Kendrick confirmed. "They went underground when you married Ryan, knowing their cover was compromised. They've been working with a splinter group, trying to protect the remaining unactivated frames." Before I could process this revelation, alarms blared through the command center. Red warnings flashed across the monitors as technicians scrambled to respond. "Multiple frame activations," someone shouted. "Patterns different from the others. It's not revelation, it's erasure." Dr. Rossi lurched to her feet. "They're triggering the failsafe, destroying the encoded data before it can be fully decrypted." "How is that possible?" Hannah demanded. "We control the network now." "No," I said slowly, understanding dawning. "We only control the frames we know about. But if my parents were guardians, if there were others..." "There's a secondary network," Dr. Rossi finished. "A failsafe within the failsafe. If the primary network was ever compromised, the secondary frames would activate to erase crucial pieces of data." Kendrick was already mobilizing teams. "We need to find these secondary frames. How many are we talking about?" "Unknown," Dr. Rossi replied. "The Guardians operated independently, each protecting different pieces of the whole. Only someone with access to the original encoding method would know." "Someone like my parents," I said. The implications hung heavy in the air. Somewhere, out there, my parents were watching these events unfold, perhaps even orchestrating this countermeasure. Everything I'd been through, my marriage, the art fraud, the revelations at the monastery, it had all been part of a larger game played across generations. "There's more," Kendrick said, pulling up another file. "We found this in the latest decoded transmissions. It's some kind of contingency plan, codenamed Chrysalis. Multiple sleeper cells positioned in major museums and private collections. Worldwide, they've been waiting for this moment." The monitors showed a surge of activity as more frames began activating, their encoded data shifting and changing. It wasn't just erasure. It was transformation. The truth was being rewritten even as we watched. "We have to stop it," I insisted. "All these revelations, the exposed secrets, we can't let them be erased or altered." "There might be a way," Dr. Rossi said thoughtfully. The box from the monastery, it didn't just contain a decoding key. It held the original encryption method, the pure form before it was divided among the guardians. Could we use it to override the secondary network? Hannah asked. Possibly, but we'd need access to a major hub, a collection of frames significant, enough to affect the entire network. I thought of Ryan's words about shaping reality from the shadows, about the careful positioning of frames in museums and private collections, about the way certain paintings had been strategically moved and reframed over decades. The Vatican, I said suddenly. Isabella said their frames were just beginning to activate. The Vatican museums hold one of the largest art collections in the world, spanning centuries. The perfect place to hide a master control system, Dr. Rossi agreed. But security there is impossible to breach, especially now with the world in chaos. A message flashed on my phone, an unknown number, but the text was in my father's distinctive style. The truth isn't in the frames, Emmy. It's in the spaces between. Find the negative space. Find us. Negative space, a basic principle of art composition. The empty areas that give meaning to the whole. I pulled up images of the Vatican Museum's layout, looking not at the galleries themselves, but at the areas around them. There, I pointed to a section of the museum complex. This area shows as storage on official plans, but look at the power usage data. It's drawing more energy than the main galleries. Kendrick studied the readings. Some kind of hidden facility. But how would we get access? Through Isabella, I said. Her grandfather's connection to the original encoding team, the Vatican would have records of that. She might have legitimate reason to request access, especially now with frames activating throughout their collection. As if on cue, Isabella's face appeared on one of the monitors. Emily, the Vatican curators are asking for help understanding the active frames. They're offering unprecedented access to their restoration facilities. It's a trap, Hannah warned. Ryan's organization would expect us to try this. Of course it's a trap, I agreed. But it's also our only chance. The secondary network is spreading. Soon there'll be nothing left of the original revelations. Dr. Rossi picked up the monastery box, its markings now dormant but still holding the key to the original encryption. I'm going with you. The method must be used correctly, or we risk destroying everything. Kendrick began coordinating with Italian authorities while Hannah assembled a tactical team disguised as art restoration experts. Within hours, we were on a private flight to Rome, watching the sun rise over a world still reeling from the first wave of revelations. Isabella met us at a private airfield, her usual elegance strained by exhaustion. The Vatican has agreed to give us access, but there's a condition. They want their own expert present, someone they trust to verify what we find. She showed us a photo on her tablet, and my heart nearly stopped. The Vatican's chosen expert was my mother. The Vatican museums loomed before us in the early morning light, their imposing architecture a stark reminder of centuries of carefully guarded secrets. My mother, Catherine Bennett, or whatever her real name was, stood at the top of the massive stairs looking exactly as I remembered, yet somehow completely different. Her familiar warm smile was there, but her eyes held a weight I'd never noticed before. Emmy, she said softly as I approached, using my childhood nickname. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for me, then stopped, uncertain. I have so much to explain. Around us, our team dispersed according to plan. Hannah and Kendrick coordinating with Vatican security, Isabella and Dr. Rossi preparing their art restoration equipment. But in that moment, the mission faded away as I faced the woman who had raised me, the guardian who had shaped my path without my knowledge. Why? It was all I could manage to ask. Because some truths are too dangerous to be given all at once, she replied. They must be earned, understood slowly. Your father and I, we were chosen as guardians not just of the frames, but of the knowledge of why they were necessary. She led us through the museum's winding corridors, past priceless artworks whose frames might hold centuries of encoded secrets. Museum staff and early morning visitors moved around us, unaware of the hidden war being waged through their beloved collections. The frames were never meant to simply reveal or hide truth, my mother explained as we descended into the restoration areas. They were designed to protect humanity from truths we weren't ready to face. Each guardian family was entrusted with a piece of a larger truth, one that could reshape our understanding of history itself. The Sullivan Organization, my mother continued as we entered a vast underground chamber filled with art restoration equipment. They discovered part of the truth by accident. But they only saw power, the ability to control narratives, to shape reality through selective revelation. They never understood the frame's true purpose. The chamber stretched deeper than any official Vatican plans had shown, its walls lined with paintings awaiting restoration. But something about their arrangement caught my eye. The frames formed patterns, their gilded edges aligned with mathematical precision. "It's a circuit," Dr. Rossi breathed, recognizing the pattern. "The frames aren't just storing information, they're processing it, communicating with each other." My mother nodded, moving to a control panel disguised as an antique workbench. This facility was built by the original Guardians, using technology far beyond what should have existed in the 1940s. That's part of what we protect, the knowledge of how such things were possible. Hannah's voice crackled through our earpieces. Movement at the north entrance. Ryan's been spotted with a team of armed men, posing as security consultants. "Let them come," my mother said calmly. "They're expected." "You knew they'd follow us?" I asked, suddenly uncertain whose side she was really on. "Of course. Just as I knew you would eventually find your way here. Everything that's happened, your marriage, the art fraud, even the monastery's activation, it was all necessary to reach this moment." The massive chamber hummed with hidden energy as more frames began to activate, their encoded patterns shifting and pulsing with increasing intensity. Dr. Rossi clutched the monastery box, its markings resonating with the frames surrounding us. "The secondary network isn't erasing truth," my mother explained. "It's preparing humanity to receive it. The initial revelations about power structures and hidden history, that was just the first layer. The real truth is far more profound." Footsteps echoed from the corridor. Ryan appeared, flanked by armed men, but also accompanied by faces I recognized from news reports. World leaders, corporate titans, people of immense power who should have been in hiding after the initial revelations. "You see," Ryan said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Even now they gather. The truth cannot be fully exposed. Humanity isn't ready." "No, Ryan," my mother replied. "You still don't understand. This isn't about hiding or revealing. It's about transformation." She pressed a sequence of buttons on the control panel. The chamber's lights dimmed as the frame's illumination grew stronger, their patterns coalescing into impossible geometries. "The frames," Dr. Rossi gasped. "They're not just storing human secrets. These patterns, they're not of earthly origin." The truth hit me with stunning clarity. The original encoding technique, the technology hidden beneath the Vatican, the careful preparation of humanity through controlled revelations. "We're not alone," I whispered. "We never were. And the Guardians. We're chosen to prepare humanity for the moment of contact," my mother finished. "The frames contain evidence of interactions spanning millennia. Art has always been our way of processing the divine, the inexplicable. These frames hold the truth of our place in a much larger universe." Ryan and his allies raised their weapons, but seemed frozen by the impossible patterns now filling the air around us. The monastery box in Dr. Rossi's hands began to pulse with blinding light. "The box doesn't just hold a key," my mother said. "It holds an invitation. Humanity stands at a crossroads. The choice to accept this truth must be made freely, with full understanding of what it means. The patterns from the frames began to coalesce into forms that challenged human comprehension. I saw Ryan's weapon fall from nerveless fingers as the true scope of what we'd been part of became clear. All the power struggles, the hidden histories, I realized, they were just preparation, teaching humanity about its own capacity for both darkness and light. Yes, my mother smiled. And you, my daughter, proved humanity's readiness. You chose truth over power, understanding over control. Your journey showed that we're finally ready for the next step. The chamber filled with light as centuries of encoded information finally fulfilled its purpose. The frames weren't just revealing truth. They were opening a door that humanity had been walking toward since the first cave paintings, the first attempts to capture glimpses of something greater than ourselves. As the light reached its peak, as reality itself seemed to shift around us, I understood at last why art had been chosen as the medium for this profound revelation. Art had always been humanity's way of reaching for the transcendent, of expressing truths too profound for words alone. The final activation spread from the Vatican throughout the world's museums and galleries, every encoded frame becoming part of a vast network of communication. The truth could no longer be hidden or controlled. Humanity would have to face its place in a universe far more wonderful and terrible than we had imagined. Ryan and his allies were taken into custody, their power structure revealed as just one small part of a much grander design. But their punishment seemed almost irrelevant now, as humanity grappled with the knowledge that we had never been alone in our journey toward understanding. My mother embraced me properly at last, her guardian's mask falling away to reveal simply a parent who had carried an impossible burden. The hardest part, she whispered, was knowing I couldn't protect you from your role in this. You had to find your own way to the truth. In the days that followed, as the world tried to process what had been revealed, I thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. My marriage to Ryan, my work in the art world, even my passion for understanding, the stories behind great works. All of it had prepared me for this revelation. The frames continue their work, no longer hiding truth, but helping humanity understand it gradually, at a pace we can accept. The guardian families, including my own, now work openly to facilitate this understanding, using art as the bridge between what we were and what we might become. And me? I've returned to curating, but with a profound new appreciation for art's role in human development. Each frame I encounter reminds me that truth, like beauty, reveals itself to those who are ready to see it. As I write this final account, I think of future generations who will grow up knowing their true place in the universe. They won't need encoded frames or guardian families to protect them from truth. They will be ready to embrace it fully, to take humanity's next steps into a reality far grander than we ever imagined. The greatest revelation wasn't just about secret histories or hidden power structures. It was about humanity's capacity to evolve, to face profound truths and emerge stronger. The frames weren't just hiding information. They were preparing us for a conversation that will change everything we thought we knew about art, truth, and our place in the cosmos. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.